Hello and welcome to Bot Populi. Bot Populi is an alternative media platform dedicated to looking at all things digital from a social justice and global south perspective. We're now also a podcast. I'm your host Tanvi Kanchan, and this is episode 3 of the Davos Diaries, where we'll be taking on questions around tech policy and digital justice and the World Economic Forum's influence in this space. How has the COVID-19 pandemic reshaped global governance? And how has big tech exploited the fault lines in the world's systems? Renata Avila describes this new era as being defined by an excessive emphasis on tech solutionism, with a growth in surveillance and control. She tells us more about how this has impacted digital justice worldwide.
The first thing I would say that is tech solutionism on steroids. That was my first reaction to it, and I had the pleasure to interview Slavoj Žižek and Evgeny Morozov and Shoshana Zuboff on the topic. And the three of them, a common view was that, tech companies were called as the saviors to find a solution. And the solution that they came up with was more surveillance and control. It was not more and better access to information. It was not getting all the researchers into a massive global cloud to collaborate and find a vaccine. It was an imposition on us, citizens all over the world, to be more monitored, to be more surveilled, to be more traced. And you are the one who will be the one spreading the virus if you don't install this app. That was the narrative, the second was they were also seen as the saviors who kept the things working as normal, because you could work from home, have school from home, have everything from home, have your friends from home, everything remote. And actually that was to a great extent a big trap, because these are not normal times. These are very pressing times, and some sectors could have just, shut down, and some people could have been better placed collaborating in the real life efforts to stop this pandemic. The thing that some people were apartheid, where some of us kept things as normal as possible, working from home, and others were outside dealing with the pandemic, is a big reflection on this and this digital apartheid. That if you are connected and well connected, you can continue as normal and completely isolate yourself and be safe while others are cleaning the streets, cleaning the hospitals, dealing with the sick people and exposing their lives. To me, it was a technology facilitated that sense of global elites continuing their lives as nothing happened. I think that also there was a big push to, and that's also something that we need to be very alert of, a big push to increase connectivity, and that was attacks on the pockets of people, of workers, not on the companies. And even if I see around myself, in the houses I was staying at during the pandemic, most of them had to increase the data plan, because of course I'm all the time online, and they were all the time online. My mom had to replace all the routers and the things in the house because my nephew was studying from home. Lots of investment from people to keep the things going and to keep the show running. And I didn't hear of many companies, giving subsidies to workers to buy a better computer. I didn't hear of schools giving money, the money that they were not using in the facilities in the school, all the money that they were saving, private schools, for children to have an allocation to have better connectivity. So it has been a massive upgrade on infrastructure, tax on the pockets of workers, basically.
Increased connectivity has been on the World Economic Forum's agenda for a long time. Harris Gleckman expands on how the WEF has now provided a space for big tech to influence governments on how digital infrastructures should be built to maximize this connectivity.
The World Economic Forum has been looking at the issue of internet issues and access for 15 to 20 years. And they are seeing how is it that particular factors and factions within the internet community, let's call it that, corporate community, are going to have to address problems of development. A straightforward issue is that in order to have a stable Wi-Fi system, you need a stable electrical system. In order to provide high-tech equipment, you need a good educational electronics and engineering student body to provide the servicing capacities. In order to benefit from the operating databases and operating websites, you need to build software trainers and software designers. And how do you take those sectors and expand them in the context of development, in the context of particular countries, has been an issue that the WEF has had on their agenda for quite a while. So their real contribution has not been so precisely about the technology industry segments fighting each other. That they've left to internet governance and the ICANN. What they have provided is a platform for those firms to think about how they can influence government policy and public perceptions in order to do all the support structures that are minimal requirements for introducing an expansion of a market in these areas in countries around the world. And that's the kind of space that Davos has provided in high-tech issues. And they're raising that in other high-tech issues at the moment as well.
Roberto Bissio explains that the lack of legalized control on a global level by multilateral bodies like the United Nations has left the door open for a privatized takeover of the internet, particularly by the USA. Through bodies like the ICANN, the multi-stakeholder model has become normalized in internet governance. This has locked out any kind of democratic participation.
Half the world population is a user on the internet, and there is no way in which these 3.5 billion people can have a say about its governance. If there was, that would probably mean that China and India would have the control because of the majority in the numbers, very clearly. Not to mention the other half of the world, the other 3.5 billion, that is not connected to the internet, that should be connected if the internet is to become a global public good, as it is becoming, even more so in these times of COVID, even more clearly and visible, and which are completely excluded about any decision of the future, and will it reach them or not, and how. These are key decisions, which in a way are included within the scope of the United Nations, but of which ICANN, Internet Authority, has no say. So in that sense, the model of multi-stakeholder governance that Davos proposes can be shown to fail as actual multi-stakeholder governance in the case of the internet. And it's just a very weak facade or window dressing for what ultimately continues being the control of the US and the favoring of US corporations over even corporations from other places. Look at TikTok or so on.
Roberto further feels that we need a new digital model for the post-pandemic world, as opposed to the concept of a great reset.
Davos comes in and says, "Oh, we need a great reset." Now, what does reset mean? You turn off the computer and turn it on again to solve the problems and expect it to work properly. That's a reset. But it was not working properly before. So, the notions of reset, of rebuilding, of back to normal, to a normal that was not working well. So I think that more and more people are thinking, no, the pandemic is opening the doors to something new, not to the better rebuilding of the old.
Barbara Adams believes that the pandemic has also revealed the extent of big tech's influence over our lives and highlighted the importance of holding it accountable.
I think the pandemic has completely demonstrated the power and dependence of big tech. But I think we've got to go back a little bit. We've been talking for quite a long time about the knowledge economy. We've been talking for quite a long time about the value added when we look at the global value chain. And it shifted who is benefiting from the functioning of the economy. I think the other thing that is really noticeable about big tech and its growth pre-COVID, if that makes sense, there was a pre-COVID world. I never thought I'd be quite that categorical, but never mind. Is such an amazing market strategy in the sense that it's not making products, it's not selling services in terms of entertainment in the same way. It is basically getting us to voluntarily give our information and selling it back to us through intermediaries. One of the things that I think we really have to focus on with all of this is the role of intermediaries. Whether the intermediaries are the advertising companies or whether the intermediaries are the investors that are moving trillions or advising pension funds how to move trillions of dollars around, so that we have a very important influencer in terms of not just how the economy works, but of how we think, what we think we want. And I think one of the other things it's demonstrated is the very successful tactic of consumption. There used to be, organizing consumer boycotts is never easy. It is even more difficult now with big tech. We all know the failures or the weaknesses of Facebook, and there have been some accounts that have been deleted. But the concept, if you're a union organizer, of organizing a boycott or getting people to close their accounts, the kind of divestment movements that we have seen that have had impact, we have to think differently, clearly, because we are also using this to communicate with each other. So I think it's shifted, but it's more than shifted, it's diluted and muddied our own concepts of organizing. And we've got a lot of work to do.
As a council member of the Progressive International, Renata has also been involved in Make Amazon Pay, a campaign led by a global coalition of civil society organizations that demands that Amazon be held accountable for its excesses. She explains why the initiative is important and why digital issues need to be looked at transversely.
As one of the co-organizers of Amazon Must Pay in the Progressive International, what we think is tech issues have been the monopoly of digital rights organizations activism for too long. And we will get nowhere because we're little, we are under-resourced, and we don't have the ability to mobilize massively. So the strategy is to make people understand and make social movements and progressives understand that it is serious. It's a serious issue, that the tech dominance that we are seeing and the arbitrary treatment that and the complete disregard of human rights that they have, and to see it as a systemic issue that affects different things that we care about, like the environment, so we can mobilize the climate activist workers, so we can mobilize unions and workers' cooperatives and so on. It is an issue of tax justice as well, so we can mobilize all the people advocating for. It is a feminist issue, so we can all mobilize women rights organizations. So if we take a systemic approach and we show that that when you have that amount of power, you exercise those power to either oppress or to enable people, depending on your choices. And these companies have decided to exercise this incredible amount of power to oppress and colonize us further, then we need to attack it by different fronts. And I'm very proud of this campaign because we captured the attention of politicians, which is always hard. And unlike other initiatives, we managed to get lots of parliamentarians pushing for legislation immediately, and I think that is balancing the power back a little bit, because the companies get like, oh my God, like I have like legislation in 10 countries at the same time, what I'm going to do with it. So I think that is the strategy we need to follow forwards. And regulation, legislation is a key part of it. Enough talking, enough multilateral, multi-stakeholder endless conversations, enough circus. Let's go back to the power, and the power is in parliaments. It's not in our nice conferences in exotic places. Not at all. It's in parliaments. So we need to get the parliaments to go back to and do their job.
Chee Yoke Ling further highlights how powerful big tech has become in dictating how we address global issues like climate change, health, or agriculture by pushing policy that suits their interests.
I think that the whole capitalist system and the actors in what somebody from UNCTAD called not just globalization but hyper-globalization. I like that term, hyper-globalization, because it really shows that it's on a scale, and we see in the digital platform players that they have become so powerful that every individual heading the Amazon and all these guys, they themselves putting themselves individually as now so talk about individuals, not even the top how many companies that are the billionaires who are shaping a lot of public discourse, even funding conservation groups. I think Bezos has just announced some huge fund, and already some of the biggest conservation organizations in the world, the international ones based in the north, are going to be getting money, and he wants something to deal with climate change. And then Gates Foundation is dealing with health, and agriculture in Africa, and they are pushing really a lot of technologies which are very contested, and also creating very different power base and no accountability.
One sector in which big tech's influence is being keenly felt during the pandemic is in agriculture and food systems. Jim Thomas sheds light on how big tech is digitalizing food systems at the expense of small farmers and fisherfolk.
Well, to begin with, how the World Economic Forum and large donors such as the Gates Foundation and others want to see a change in food systems, it's very straightforward. They see the coming potential of digital food systems from one end to the other. The ability to track and trace and sell through e-commerce, but also to deploy robots in the field, the Internet of Things, artificial intelligence algorithms, designing seeds, the sort of digital opportunities in the food system as a massive killing field for industry, and they want to accelerate agriculture from being a millennia-old activity that that works with the soil and farmers' knowledge to being a sort of data generating profit source. In order to enable that digitalization of the food system from top to tail, there's now a real push to change how the food system is governed internationally, globally. And to do that in the context of the challenges of climate change, of hunger and so forth, but always with an eye to how do you create this new digital food system. One thing that the shift to digitized farming and the digital food chain enables is grabbing the rest of the land and grabbing control over the basic resources. That if you can bring in drones to map the land, you can bring in ag robots and then blockchains to manage the sale. You can increasingly take control over bits of land that farmers, small farmers, peasants still have some say over. And so, this set of technologies, digital technologies, will facilitate a massive wave of land grabbing and grabbing of resources. Of course, it's also, the same digitization is happening in water, the same digitization is happening across different areas. So, as you enable this digitization of the food system, you enable this technological grab over the basic resources of food growing and of life and community, then inevitably that pushes out peasants, pushes out fisherfolk and so forth.
Jim notes that the pandemic has rejuvenated local food systems, but has also allowed for a rise in the power of e-commerce platforms, which does not bode well for food sovereignty.
Certainly, we've seen in urban settings and in industrialized settings this massive shift to online grocery and increasing power of these large e-commerce platforms. And that is driving changes that are going to be hugely problematic in terms of food sovereignty and who controls the food system. We look at a company like Amazon, and Amazon now has tentacles right the way through the food system. Their big data platform, Amazon Web Services, is becoming the major data platform for digitized agriculture. They're really becoming a key player in logistics, moving food around. They're certainly the major player in warehousing and so forth, and then right through to delivering food to people and manipulating how people choose food, through the ability to use hyper nudging and these kind of data strategies at the consumer end. So we're seeing now these data players who we're used to thinking of as being about media and so forth, becoming major players in how people are fed, and therefore having a big say in hunger. And that's hugely concerning.
The WEF has also embarked on a new venture called the Earth Bank of Codes, which is an attempt to digitalize the DNA data of living creatures, and which Jim terms as a type of genomic biopiracy, facilitated by tech. This can pave the way for big tech and its allies to acquire a monopoly over food systems.
So the Earth Bank of Codes is actually an initiative that was announced at the World Economic Forum a couple of years ago. And it's on the face of it, it's an attempt to take all of the genomic data, the DNA data of species, including agricultural species, and put them on a blockchain, so that there would be sort of a central place where you could access the DNA codes of all living things that have ever been sequenced. And behind this attempt, so rather audacious attempt to do this, is a shift in how we store living diversity. And increasingly, there's been a recognition that alongside these living genomic banks of seeds, these organisms can also be sequenced, and their DNA codes can be put up on a website, and that therefore you can increasingly dispense with the living matter and just maintain the digital codes. And the reason why that's very exciting to the biotech industry, for example, is they can then turn those digital codes through new genomic techniques such as CRISPR gene editing or through synthetic biology. They can rebuild those codes anywhere they want in the world, mix and match them, and genetically engineer new crops, but also engineer bacteria and yeast and so forth to express the proteins that they want. So you now have this new growing industry of what are called biofoundries, where artificial intelligence will use bits of DNA code, design new organisms that will create vanilla or will create stevia and these kind of high value products. And that industry, the biofoundry industry, what it wants as its raw material is the digital DNA. It's those DNA codes. So the Earth Bank of Codes is really an attempt to deliver that.
With big tech's stranglehold over the world's resources and systems growing, helped in no small part by the pandemic, it's more crucial than ever before for civil society to come together to challenge it and resist this corporate takeover. Tune in for the final episode of the mini-series, where we'll hear from our guests on the opportunities for civil society to embark on this task and what their message is for Davos 2021. This has been episode 3 of the Davos Diaries, a podcast mini-series by Populi. Set up in 2018 by 7 organizations from across the globe, Populi is an alternative media platform that's reframing the conversation on digital justice and critically examining the new contours of our digitalizing world. Populi's founding members are the Latin American Information Agency, Data Justice Lab, Development Alternatives with Women for a New Era, Derechos Digitales, Internet Lab, IT for Change, and the JustNet Coalition. Engage with more of our work on botpopuli.net.